Good morning. It is November 2nd, and we are continuing with our discussion of perceptual psychology. We had a really good presentation yesterday, I think. It gave us an overview, but let's just recap what. Let's recap what we did yesterday. Can you see that okay? Dim a little bit. How's that, better? We went over the definition of perception. We went over the role of nature, nurture in how we perceive reality. We went over the role of expectancy. We went over feature detectors. We went over Gestalt principles of perception, perceptual constancies, perceptual organization of figure ground. We talked about ambiguous stimuli and more Gestalt principles, camouflage, perceptual hypotheses, and the Necker cube with ambiguous stimuli. Did anybody from who was here yesterday have a question on any of this that we want to review? You're okay for now? I would say make sure we keep this in mind as we are preparing to get a test on this. You're going to have to make sure you understand this very carefully. This is the harder, more nebulous or more abstract elements of this unit. The sensation component is basic biology. Okay, parts of the senses and how they function. That's easy. This stuff is a little bit more complicated, and I think you're going to need to put a little bit more effort into recognizing it. But once you get the idea that our experience is necessary to perceive the world accurately, then you're going to get the main idea. Does that make sense? So in this concept of nature, nurture, we're going to reinforce. Okay, any questions? All right. Today, our goal is to get through these. Basically, depth perception, binocular cues, retinal disparity, muscular cues, accommodation, convergent, visual, and the visual cliff. These are all related to perception of visual stimuli and how our brain automatically processes it, how our brain, can perceive 3 dimensions, and just the background behind that. So it's pretty basic. I think you'll get a lot out of this is pretty easy in my view. A couple of vocabulary words are a little bit difficult, and hopefully we'll finish up most of this. So depth perception, we started with yesterday. And from your reading, what is the number one thing you need? What is the number one thing related to depth perception? What causes us to perceive to perceive depth? Parallel processing is an issue. We do it automatically. We assess depth as well as color and as well as motion and things of that nature. We can see those things all at once. That's parallel processing. But there's one other thing I think we talked about yesterday.
Retinal disparity.
Retinal disparity. You have 2 eyes, and the image is projected on 2 different retinas. Therefore, that gives you the first indicator of depth. Okay? The ability to perceive 3-dimensional. We can use it to estimate and understand distance. It is inborn, a nativist quality, nature, but it is also nurture, experiential. We have basically the great study is called the visual cliff, and I didn't make you read it. It's in your textbook, and I'll show you. You'll recognize it if you did the reading on this section. But the reality is, your brain and your visual senses, evolutionary, right, is a wonderful mechanism that comes with already in place the hardware, basically, to perceive depth. But the problem is, if we don't have the experience, we're not perceiving depth accurately. Does that make sense? And the visual cliff experiment, which we'll talk about in a minute, proved it. And we'll see that. So it's both nature and nurture is the main idea. Stereoscopic vision, that's two eyes. That's the retinal disparity. The image is projected slightly differently because there's a separation by your nose, etc., in your vision. So this would be the primary element of depth perception, is because of retinal disparity. Two different images are projected on two different retinas. They are processed together, and therefore we can perceive depth. The discrepancy in images that reaches the right and left eye. The 3D movie is also goes off the same principle, that you have multiple cameras projected at different angles, slightly different angles, and then there's also filtering of, the glasses filter different elements of the film. Does that make sense? And that's what gives you the 3D image when you're watching a 3D movie. So it's multiple cameras, and then the filtering, the lenses, the green and the red lens basically filters what goes into your retinal display, and you sense three-dimensional when it's really not. Get it? You understand? Hopefully. We'll look at a picture in a minute. Yes?
So like going back to the empiricist and nativist thing, we learn how to perceive depth. Oh, we have the ability, like we're born with the gene to give us the ability to do it, and then we learn from it. Is that why if you close one eye, you still have that depth perception somewhat? You're still not seeing like both the same way?
Probably. So I would say probably. You're used to perceiving depth. It's not accurate because you don't have both eyes, and it is flawed. Okay, that's probably learned. Okay, when you have both eyes, that's a natural inborn kind of basic element. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you can see there's something weird going on. With experience, you understand it completely. You get it? I think that's how it works. Yeah. Here, this is a stereoscope. Stereoscopic means two eyes. This was an early three-dimensional postcard viewer from the 19th century, probably 1850s or 60s, when they're developing photography. And the way it works is you put this postcard in like a, that new, what's that stuff called, the new phones that you could put in a little holder, and it's a virtual reality thing, the commercials.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it's very much what this was. This was it had some lenses, and it had a place to put a card, and you could experience three-dimensional images. Two slightly different images are projected on the retina separately, so you had a depth perception issue. This is called stereoscopes. Fun fact. But it relates to what? Why does this relate? Why do we put this on here? Because stereoscopic vision or retinal disparity. Okay. The visual cliff. Oh, this is wonderful. This was basically an experiment. We need a volunteer. Jersey?
Yeah.
You can be our volunteer. I should really make you read that.
The concept of testing depth perception basis.
Okay, let's pause our filming for a minute.
All of these videos.